Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everyone. This gentleman has provided us in these podcasts with a lot of insight on a lot of trending stories. Last time we got together, we talked about the Microsoft code situation that affected the entire world. We're going to look at the Olympics in just a few minutes, but before that, we're going to talk about his story. He is Jackson Pleis, and he is the senior research scientist at Space Whale Technologies. Welcome back, Jackson. How you doing?
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me again. I'm doing all right. How about
Yeah,
yourself?
good, real good. Last time we got together, or actually a few times back, we talked about your story, which offers a lot of inspiration for many, and how you moved your life forward, overcoming a lot of challenges, and still do. We all have challenges in life, and you're still doing that. You talked about your diagnosis and the number of different things, autism being one of those. Tell us about that diagnosis, what you learned from it, and how you navigate life now.
Yeah, was actually kind of very crazy and a lot of emotions involved in it when it happened. And it's sort of the way it happened sort of just goes to show how autistic I sort of am when it comes to certain things. So basically, COVID had happened, and I had just gotten out of rehab for alcohol. And my mom had just recently really broken her leg. She attempted water skiing, which she hadn't done in, let's say, 15 years or something like that, even though she used to be a wonderful, wonderful water skier, grew up on lakes, and she wanted to try it again, and it had been a long time. And the first time it got pulled, it broke her leg. And I went and visited her when she was recovering and on a lot of painkillers. And I wasn't drinking at the time, but then I saw how comfortable she was and being in chronic pain. I relapsed, but on heroin. And yeah, and then I went kind of crazy, and then I was also drinking at the time and ended up in the hospital detoxing. And because I was in a danger to myself and along these other things, they put me on what's called a 72-hour like psychiatric hold. And this was, COVID time. I mean, this was kind of like all, crazy world stuff. And so they had some facilities in the area, and one of them, it's like a prison kind of, and but with psychiatric doctors and nurses and but other patients as well, and it's co-ed and everything like that. So I got locked up in there, and the first day I'm in there, this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful African American girl comes up to me and grabs me in the private parts and just goes, "I want to, have sex with you tonight." And I was like, "Okay, sounds great." And wasn't really thinking, obviously. And so that happened that night, and I was like, okay, it's not so bad being stuck in here. But the following night, I was like, okay, this is going to probably happen again. But instead of it happening again, the girl punches me just out of the blue. I hadn't even talked to her that day, and just punches me in the head. And I had had a lot of head injuries up until that point with the falling off the cliff and being in the coma. And so it's really easy once you have a head injuries after that, it's really easy to get concussions. And so I then proceeded to call the police. And then after that, I got a hold of like the DSM-5 as well as all the paperwork I could from the facility, because they're legally obligated to, because you can act as your own lawyer to get yourself out. And so then I stayed up almost every night reading the DSM-5 and all of these psychiatric things and all the procedures around the facility, that when I got to meet the psych doctor, it would happen on a weekend. On the Monday morning when the psych doctor came in, I essentially diagnosed myself. So I essentially had gone through the psych evaluations before the doctor had even come in, and I was like, oh wow, this is probably what they'll tell me that I am, or why I'm in here, or part of the reason. And so it was basically just like a conversation with the doctor at that point that she was like, basically, I said everything that she was gonna basically tell me anyways. And then because of the whole drama situation, they let me out of the facility earlier than I would have normally been held in there. So
Wow.
yeah, it's just a journey for anybody with a mental, disorder that they're trying to work through. And, I hope for most people that it doesn't involve such crazy behaviors and such drastic, you know, means to like get help. But unfortunately, in my situation, because of the alcohol abuse and being very stubborn, it took a long time until, I even got diagnosed or anything like that. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. What kind of support did they believe everything you were telling them while you were in there? Or you just felt that at this point, I need to take it into my own hands and I got to get out of here, or I have to I need to I need to do something here.
Yeah, I mean, basically they can pull to all your medical records pretty fast. It's just a lot of it's related to your social security number, and addresses and names. So through the history, there had been other doctors that had made comments along the way and different things like that in my medical record that would have indicated it. Anyways, it just so happens that that was the first time that I was in such a situation that I needed the psych doctor to evaluate me before I could even leave. And it just so happens that because I essentially evaluated myself with the same outcome as what she would have, she was like, okay, you seem to have a grasp on at least who you are, that and you're not gonna, and assuming you stay off the you know opiates and the alcohol, you seem to have a control over your life. A lot of the other people that are in there, most of them are homeless, and things like that, or have very severe mental disorders that need more medications and things like that in there. When I got in there, I had already been on some of the medications because of like I was just in rehab for alcohol. And so there's doctors when you go into rehab that also sort of diagnose these things. But they don't necessarily tell you like, hey, I think you're autistic unless there was a big reason for them to like be diagnosing you. They're in there to help address like alcoholism or alcohol problems or opiate problems when you're in the rehab. They're not there to essentially diagnose you in a psychiatric setting, unlike if you get put on like a 72-hour hold where they want to know what's going on with you before they release you back into the public because they're worried, is he going to hurt himself or is he going to hurt somebody else? In my case, I've never, hurting other people. No, definitely not.
So your official diagnosis, did that come at that point in your life, or was there more before that? Now because we're referencing here right around the time of COVID, right?
Yeah, but, I mean, it goes way, way back. Even when I was a small child, my parents took me to like special testing at the university, and things like that had to do with the dyslexia, the lazy eye. I was really good at putting puzzles together and, assembling certain things. And so I tested really, really high in certain categories. And then, you know, grammar, for example, tested below average. So, yeah, I've sort of been tested and in and out of lots of different medical settings. And so I'm sure there's been other times that doctors had diagnosed that about me through my life, but I either didn't want to hear it because I'm stubborn, or was under the influence of a lot of different medications at the time they told me and don't exactly remember. But the most solidified uh, time was, of course, being, held up in a psych hold where, you have, no, they take away a lot of your freedom,
Gotcha.
obviously.
Sure. And at this point in your life, what's the status? What's happening now?
Yeah, so basically, they need to figure out medications that will help you, and figure out at what time, when do you need those medications and what helps the brain. And luckily, there's been so much science and so much research in neuroscience over the years with basically the brain chemistry. And so there's so many medications out there that help very specific problems, and there's also medications out there that help a very wide variety of problems. Essentially, what happens in my brain is I have this like serotonin like inrush when I either get really, really happy or really, really sad or really, really emotional. And as a kid, my sisters would make fun of me, but like when I get really excited, I'll rub my face like with my hands, like all over. And I don't mean to do it, and I can't even tell myself not to do it, and it just happens uncontrollably. I won't even know that I am doing it sometimes. And then my sisters would make fun of me as a kid, or I would go outside and go on a swing, because I would get your adrenaline going and talk to myself about things, and then jump off the swing as high as I could, and get hurt that way as a kid. So I've always shown all the signs of autism and OCD in specific categories of, like software code, or like, things that need to be very, very controlled, or for safety and stuff like that. Some car stuff, oxygen safety, things like that. So yeah, it's interesting. And so the medications is really a big key for people that have like an imbalance like this. So basically, the medication that I take for it sort of keeps that, or sort of rebalances that serotonin rush, essentially. I take it at night. And so during the day, I'll still get these obviously moments where I'm not on that medication. And so I'll still get the times where I'll rub my face or get excited, or the vice versa, where I'll get angry and blurt out and swear, or, punch the wall or punch something, or, get angry. And it's, even though I want to not do it, it just happens anyways.
Do you find that you're able to channel some of that in a positive direction within the tech work you do?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, for the tech work as well as the clean energy stuff, because of the combustion, the plasmas, the high voltages, being in like doing dangerous experiments, doing high pressure, high temperature stuff, detonation work. That stuff has really drawn me. It's always drawn me since I was a kid, building fireworks and big bonfires out in the forest and things, and always wanting to know how those work so that we didn't set forest fires, because there wasn't a whole lot of, fire uh, fighters out there and stuff like that, but a lot of forest. So we really had to be careful if we wanted to play with that stuff. And it's really helped me in my, professional life, as well as, working on cars, and, that's combustion, there's high voltage, there's, you got to be careful with that if you're trying to do like show cars. People put a lot of, money and, passion into their cars, especially, if they're an antique and stuff like that.
Sure. Sure. Let's pivot over to the Olympics. Last time we got together, we talked about trending
I was
things.
actually just going to help with that. Yeah. So the other thing that it helped with is sports. So my whole family was actually it's an excellent sports family, if you will. My parents actually met playing rugby. My dad
Oh
played
wow.
in the national sevens, and they won a national championship when it was, and met my mom. My mom played rugby as well, and that's how they met, which is pretty crazy. And so tough. My dad played football for Berkeley. He was also a pole vaulter.
Wow.
His little brother played for Wazoo, and then his older brother played for Stanford for a bit. And my grandpa played for Army, and my other grandpa played for University of Washington. So just a large sports family. And myself, I played football. In fact, when I was in high school, I set the state record for field point after kicks in one game. It's at like 13.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, you really have a family of sports enthusiasts.
Yeah,
Amazing.
so it's exciting. I love the Olympics are great. I'm excited this year is the first year they have a 50-50 split of women and men. I thought that was great. Some new um, events as well.
Sure.
Oh man, get the basketball team just crushed it. Kevin Durant, 8 for 8 field goals. Oh my gosh. One thing is I was a high jumper in college and in high school, and the Ukrainian woman that broke the women's high jump record. That was amazing. That was in the trials, but still, that record hasn't been broken forever. The men's hasn't been broken in a really long time.
It seems like they're making the Olympics more and more, I guess the word is mainstream, where you don't have to be deep into sports, but you can appreciate it. Um, I mean, there could be some debate on this, but breakdancing is now an
Right.
Olympic sport.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
saw that, and I saw a clip of a Neil talking about how do you score it, basically, and it's pretty cool that we have all these new technologies and the camera systems and feedback systems that they can sort of make at least an attempt at like normalizing the scoring by saying, these tricks are this hard and these types of tricks are this hard and you did this amount of these tricks and this amount of these tricks and then put it into a computer program that kind of spits out, a you know a relative score to each other, I guess, if you will. Um, I think it's great that they're adding new sports or trying new things, as long as the competitors understand that it's still a learning process for the building the computer system that's judging it, or the judges around it, that they can't get too upset if they don't win on a technicality or something like that in a specifically new type of sport that they're having to come up with a whole new way of judging.
What would you like to see within the Olympics? And it could be anything. It could be technology, it could be a sport, it could just be a change.
Yeah, it's so now that I'm handicapped, every athlete I would hope, hopefully aspires to be an Olympic athlete, right? So I did winter sports and summer sports and, would have loved to be in the Olympics and tried my best and stuff. But now that I'm handicapped, and I believe that, there's a movie out about this as well, but essentially robotics are getting a lot better and smaller, and power sources are becoming a lot smaller and holding a lot more energy. So potentially we could start seeing, the robotic limbs replacements. So I was thinking about this just as I would love
Hmm.
to not have
Hmm.
arthritis in my ankle anymore, and it would be nice to cut it off and replace it with a robotic ankle. And so, of course, I've researched that and looked at that. And the biggest hurdle with that currently, or at least from what I could tell, is it's not medically allowed. If I were to design this robotic limb, no doctor could say, at least in the United States, hey, chop my ankle off and put this,
Sure.
ankle that I designed on. They would say, yeah, I don't want to lose my license.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of R&D that goes into prosthetics and all of that. So,
Tons of it. Yeah, I have a carbon fiber one alone, and yes, a lot of science and a lot of engineering has gone into just the statically built stuff. And then once you throw in kinematics, then yeah, it adds a whole other layer of complexity. But I do believe that that is sort of a much kind of further one down the road. But I believe they've also talked about like allowing doping, basically, for of
hmm.
course, adult athletes, after college, right? Because you don't want a bunch of college kids doping while they're still growing, and that would really make NCAA way too tricky. But let's say you have a group of professional athletes that always is getting like 25th position or something like that. And instead of just continuing to get 20th position, or, they join a separate sort of league that allows for, controlled doping under doctor supervision so they don't destroy their internal organs or anything like that. But then you could have sort of a separate category with separate records for different sports, which would be an interesting category scientifically too, to sort of say how far can we push the human body, assuming we don't put, we'll put the restriction of, we don't want to kill these people or damage them long term, but how far could somebody jump? How fast could somebody sprint? It's an interesting idea, and it sort of also falls in line with sort of the transsexual, transgender stuff happening as well, where we could also sort of start having basically a hormone class, where you could test the athletes, estrogen and testosterone levels, and sort of see where they might fit in with all the other people. And then we could sort of split up more categories and have more records. I mean, there's no reason not to, be happy for anybody's success, right? So it doesn't hurt to make new categories if, as long as people would want that.
It's amazing how we went from breakdancing to these different areas. What do you say? We're just about out of time, but I'm curious. What do you say, Jackson, to somebody that is going through challenges, let's say physical, maybe mental challenges, to have inspiration to continue and to be positive and really get things done in their life? What would your advice to them be?
Everybody's going to have down years, down days, and also up days and up years and things like that. Basically, what I've found is you can't wallow in the bad, and you can't let that basically dictate your life. Even if you're working in a job that you absolutely can't stand the ownership or the management or the job you're doing every single day, you need to find something that you can grab onto that pulls you out of the funk in order to turn yourself around. And because there's so many people out there that are willing to help others, like myself, and there's so many coaching opportunities, and there's a lot of classes taught by people that have gone through similar situations. So there's a lot of information out there, and it just takes your willingness to put in the effort to learn it.
Got to have the will. Thank you for being here today. Covered a lot of different territory, but very interesting, and especially current events like the Olympics. Your website is spacewhaletech.com. Is that right?
Correct. That's the consulting part of the website. And then there's another domain called Everything Space Whale that's got shirts with my logo and some electronics and things like that if people want to support my business.
Yeah, I haven't checked that one out. Definitely got to look into that. Thanks for being here today. Appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Have a wonderful time.
You too.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.